Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm Shiny. I handle content at AdTech and iMedia events in India, and I'm your host for today. We have an interesting conversation lined up for you, something we have all been experiencing either as a marketer or a consumer. We are in the midst of significant digital disruption, with business and consumers increasingly adopting online channels to conduct business and meet their needs. The consumer journey is now an interesting mix of online and offline channels. And for brands and retailers, this means that the sales funnel is getting more and more complicated. During the last few months, Indians have taken to new e-commerce marketplaces, increasingly so during the pandemic lockdown. These e-marketplaces are now playing a key role in not just online sales, but in influencing people's tastes, opinions, and desires. To unravel this new journey and behavior patterns associated with it, AdTech and Amazon today bring you some insightful discussions on the evolving omni-channel consumer journey and the online shopper profile. This webinar will not just discuss the evolving customer journey, but how buyers are exploring newer categories that they previously purchased in person, like luxury or day-to-day groceries, and how marketers should respond to meet these new expectations that today's consumers have. We have two great sessions and speakers lined up for you to take on this subject, one from a research perspective and the other from a brand's perspective. Thank you, speakers, for your time with us today. Let's first see what the data tells us. So 50% of active internet users in India research online before making a purchase. 75% of them use Amazon. The average number of websites that a researcher who's doing online research visits is 2.5. Interesting, right? Our first session looks at the online shopper profile in much more detail. Amazon and Kantar partnered to do some in-depth research into how consumer behaviors have evolved in the last 18 months and are here to share these insights with us today. Joining us is Anjali Malhotra, Vice President for Consumer Insights, Kantar South Asia. A thought leader and a keen researcher, Anjali has close to 2 decades of experience in consumer insights and has partnered with some of the most admired brands across the globe, helping them leverage these insights into marketing strategies for growth. Speaking with her on the key points of this research is Suhain Singhal, Marketing Manager at Amazon Advertising. Suhain has extensive experience in long-term growth strategy and digital marketing and is instrumental in shaping the thought leadership agenda for Amazon Advertising. Over to you, Anjali and Suhain.
Hi, Anjali, and thank you, Shiny, for that kind introduction and setting up the context. Now, last year has seen a significant change in consumer behavior globally, and India is no different. Consumers are spending more time indoors, leading to higher adoption of digital across the entire customer journey. More consumers today discover products online, conduct their research online, and eventually more of them buy online than ever before. This has led to a significant change in the online consumer profile as more and more consumers adopt digital across the journey. Now, this has also changed the role played by digital channel itself. Amazon and Kantar recently conducted a study among Indian consumers to understand this further. And I'll request Anjali to throw some light on the key learnings from the study.
Thank you, Suhain. First, I'll just like to mention that I'm very excited to be here today and participate in today's discussion. So before we actually walk through some of the findings of the study that we are talking about, let me quickly touch upon the context for the study, as well as the methodology that we kind of followed for it. So if you can allow me to kind of share some slides, just give me a minute. Starting with what was the study aimed to kind of deliver. So there were 3 key objectives to the study. One was to understand the consumer research behavior, and especially the role of digital channels in the same. The second was to understand what role Amazon is playing in that consumer research journey, and how they're going through it along with Amazon. And the third objective was to also kind of draw out the profile of Amazon users, and in kind of benchmarking it or drawing a comparison with how do that look similar or different to the profile of the average internet user in India. So those were the three key objectives. And to deliver these three objectives, we had actually constructed a very extensive study. As you can see, this study covered nearly a sample size of 5,200, covering almost, about 37 towns. And the town representation spanned from metros to the smaller towns with just 2 to 5 lakhs population. Uh, this sample that we captured was representative of the average internet user in India, in urban India, and had coverage across gender, age, town class, as well as the NCCS classification.
Got it. And thanks for walking us through the construct, Anjali. That sounds very robust. You talked about three key objectives for the research, right? Let me pick up on the first objective that you talked about. That is the change in consumer research behavior. Now, let me ask this in a very fundamental way. What did you exactly observe in the survey when you looked at the overall research behavior among Indian consumers?
All right, so Hen, so one of the key things that we found out was that, we kind of, the study uncovered that nearly 50% of internet users, their purchase is influenced by digital platforms. And if I have to break this down further, what we observed was that close to 40% said that they have made an online purchase in the last 6 months. And an additional 12% said that while they did not make a purchase, they researched online prior to their actual purchase. So that kind of, adding up to almost a 50%. And just to clarify, when I spoke about research, and I kind of, refer to the 12% number there, that only includes those who research online prior to an actual purchase. And it doesn't include individuals who research online but did not actually go through the purchase. Moving on, the interesting thing that we also found out around this was that this phenomena of, purchases being digitally influenced was very democratic. So if you see on this slide, there is no difference by town class. There is, if you look at top 9 cities in rest of India, it's very similar. And even when I look at age and NCCS, while there is a slight over indexation among those who are younger and more affluent, it's not that, the older and less affluent are any, significantly far behind.
Thank you, Anjali. I think, in fact, we have also observed that this number of online researchers and shoppers have gone up significantly in the last 1 year. And across a number of researches that we have conducted, some of them with Kantar itself, we have observed that this number has gone up significantly. Consumer journey today, I think, has become fairly complex, with omni-channel being the buzzword. I believe that no brand today can afford to completely lose focus on either of these channels, and especially online. And this growing trend of online research is also something we are observing across the visitors on Amazon. In fact, searches on Amazon have grown rapidly in the last 1 year. Consumers are spending a lot of time not just making the purchase, but also researching on Amazon. That brings me to the next question, Anjali, and touching on the second key theme that you talked about. How did you see the relevance of Amazon among these online shoppers and researchers?
All right. Okay. So as you rightly said that, research has grown, and what we found out in the study is that consumers don't really rely on a single kind of a, source when they are researching online. And on an average, we found that, online researchers are referring to 2 to 3 websites to make their research, before they make the purchase. That's one. And, looking at the interaction with Amazon, what we found out was that Amazon remained a, key research destination among consumers. And when we asked them in the survey about, which is a website that you refer to when you are doing your online research, almost a 75% spoke about, using Amazon. And again, interestingly, when we kind of deep dive to understand differences by specific segments, what we found out was that, the use of Amazon as a research destination, it kind of cuts through. It cuts through different age bands. It is prevalent across town class, and it's also prevalent across the different NCCS groups. And in fact, one more interesting nugget to reflect on the question that that we are discussing. What we also noted was that use of Amazon as a research destination cuts across the different product categories. So we spoke about, research in the context of a purchase that consumers are making,
Right.
and that purchase in the context of different subcategories also saw, prevalence of using Amazon for the research.
Got it. That was very insightful as well, Anjali. I think it is critical to note that Amazon is an important research destination and not just a shopping destination for consumers. And it is important for brands to see it from that perspective as well. That engagement on Amazon is not just restricted to purchase on Amazon, but also look at it from a broader sense. We have also consistently observed this across a number of first-party and third-party researches we have conducted, in fact. I think across all of these studies, Amazon has consistently emerged as a number one research destination among Indian consumers. While we have seen that preference for Amazon is fairly high in this study as well as in past studies as well, Anjali, could I request you to also bring some flavor around what is this average Amazon user profile that we're talking about? How do they behave? What are the usual habits?
Yeah, sure, Sohain. In fact, when we looked at Amazon user profile in the study, we tried to understand the profile in three key aspects: demographics, their lifestyle choices, as well as their, shopping behavior. Before I, kind of deep dive into some of these aspects, I just want to kind of, clarify how we are defining an Amazon user in this context. So we are looking at everyone who either use Amazon to shop online or use Amazon to do their research online, and defining this group as Amazon users. So starting with the demographic differences that we note. So as you would also note here, what came out very clearly is that an Amazon user is younger, uh, more educated, better employed in an organized sector, as well as more affluent in comparison with the average internet user in urban India. While this was what we noted for demographic, when we moved to their lifestyle choices, again, some very interesting observations came through. So there were, three key themes which came across. The first one being that Amazon users like to follow latest trends. So essentially, how are we saying this? So what we observed from the study is that 29% of Amazon users say that when it comes to new products and new technology, they are amongst the first in their circles to try that. Another 57% spoke about how they like to stay up to date with the latest fashion trends. The second theme that came out was that Amazon users love their leisure time and like to spend their weekends well. So what we observed was that, an Amazon user would typically, 6% of them, would typically travel abroad once in a year, and 23% would travel frequently domestically every year. And this is, of course, prior to COVID. We know that COVID has changed our lives. And then the third theme is in keeping with, what we're observing as an emerging theme in general, which is about, the focus on health and well-being. And what we noted over there is that 21% of Amazon users are diet conscious. And when I say diet conscious, I mean that they're very conscious of what they're eating. They try and avoid junk food. They have a preference for natural, organic, fresh food, and 32% of them exercise actively. And this could be through, various means. It could be in the form of yoga, Zumba, gymming, or even outdoor sports. Moving on to their, shopping behavior, which is another aspect that we, kind of try to profile Amazon users on. What we noted over here is that Amazon users tend to spend more both offline and online. Now, the interesting thing over here is that, while online behavior in a way was expected, what we found interesting was that even when it comes to shopping offline, Amazon users tend to outspend the average internet user in India.
Right. I think on this slide, I also observed that the Amazon shopper actually buy twice as many categories offline as compared to categories they purchase online, right? And I think this is especially important for brands who sell across online and offline, that their consumer that they potentially engage on Amazon has a very high likelihood of shopping offline as well. In fact, twice as much likelihood of shopping offline as compared to shopping on Amazon. So that's something very interesting that stands out to me. Anjali, can I also request you to throw some lights on the kind of purchases Amazon shoppers are more likely to make, when you're talking about either online or offline? This becomes especially important given that they have more refined lifestyle preferences, as we have just seen, and also their higher spending ability and habits.
All right, sure, Sohain. So on that aspect, which is, their shopping and ownership behavior, so there are two distinct differences that we observed when we kind of, looked at their habits and compared that with that of the average internet user. So first looking at, discretionary products, high value discretionary products. And when I say that, I mean, products such as smart TV or an automatic washing machine or a dishwasher or, smart wearables, etc. So when we looked at ownership for highly discretionary categories such as these, what we observe is that an Amazon user is 1.5 to 2x times more likely to own these categories as compared to an average internet user. The other observation that we had was we kind of also looked at ownership of premium brands within other, categories. And here, what came out was that, Amazon users came out to be brand seekers in a way, in the sense that, when in the survey, we kind of spoke to the respondents about categories such as, sportswear, premium smartphones, apparel, sunglasses, etc. We found out that premium brands for these categories, the ownership of these is again, almost 1.5x times more likely among an Amazon shopper versus an average internet user.
Got it. I think this also sort of ties back to their higher spending power as well. But obviously, this provides an additional proof that that spending power is also translating into actual purchases among Amazon shoppers. So not only they are more affluent, but they actually go and transact and buy more premium categories, more premium brands in those categories, etc. So that's very interesting to note. I think that is all from my end, Anjali. Thanks a lot for walking us through these findings. I'm hoping our audience found some of these as insightful and relevant. Let me now give the stage back to Shiny, who will take you through all the next session for the day.
Thank you so much for those insights, Anjali and Sohain. It is good to see those numbers match up with our day-to-day experiences. Now that we've heard how the consumer is evolving, let's hear from some strategic brands on how they're making the most of these new consumer journeys. From marketing to logistics, the world looks way different for them. Let's welcome Nikhil Rastogi, Commercial Director, Dyson. Nikhil comes with extensive experience building the market for Dyson products in India. He was previously head of marketing for Amazon and CMO for Citibank in India. He's also part of the advisory board for AdTech. Next up, we have Priyanka Gandhi, who is the Associate Director, Integrated Marketing Communication and E-commerce Marketing for Colgate-Palmolive, India. Priyanka has more than 20 years of experience in functional leadership roles across India's marquee CPG company, Colgate-Palmolive, and media and communication agencies, including Madison Communications, Carrot, and Starcom. We also have with us Vishal Jacob, who is the Chief Digital Officer at Wavemaker. Vishal has led and assisted clients across industries in their digital transformation journey, hinging it on creating a connected ecosystem of paid, owned, and earned properties. As a digital marketeer, Vishal has witnessed the roller coaster ride of India's digital marketing transformation from the dot-com burst in the early 2000s to the current age of data-driven marketing. Welcome, speakers. It is great to have you all on board to speak about your experiences of the last 18 months. So, Nikhil, I want to start the first question with you. You handle a luxury brand and clearly a high price, high quality, discretionary spend product. And I remember you telling me that the product has done really, really well in 2020, 2021. So tell me, what changes in consumer behavior have you noticed? So if you could, for example, compare for me your 2019 consumer with your 2020 or your 2021 consumer, how would that be? How has their journey evolved?
All right. So first of all, I would like to say that we don't sell a luxury product. It's a premium utility product. And the reason I say that all our products solve everyday consumer needs. And I do agree there is an element of discretionary nature to them, but essentially they are all utility products. Coming down specifically to your question, look, I think as human beings and as individuals, all of us have changed a lot in the last couple of years, undeniably. And consumers are no different. They are people like you and me. So still just trying to bucket some of the key changes from our point of view. So the first one is this big shift towards health and hygiene. And again, if we look around us, I think all of us are gravitating towards this change. We are just being more conscious about health and hygiene. And clearly a big shift that I think will stay with consumers for time to come. And consumers are a lot more caring when it comes to health and hygiene than when they were, let's say, a couple of years back. The other shift I think is this drive towards conscious consumption. So people are very conscious on what they are consuming and what they are spending on. So I think, therefore, I brought earlier the point on utility. So clearly a drive towards essentials, big shift towards utility, way more research that's going in by the consumers in terms of what choices they are making. Some are going for more Indian brands, some are going for more sustainable brands, etc. So clearly there is a rise in this conscious consumption. The third one I would say is a clear shift towards quality stroke brand. So we are seeing, I think, two emerging trends here. One is consumers trying to experiment more and more. And the other one is that consumers sticking to quality. So there is a clear flight to safety, if I were to. And brands that have been there in the market and brands that are established, I think brands which have already gained consumer trust, be it because of the fact that they've been around for a long time or because they've got positive word of mouth and so on, I think again are attracting a lot more consumers, and you see a clear shift there. And lastly, I would say, I think consumers are also demanding more authenticity than they were. And that's something that's also caught up with this COVID, and people are really clearly trying to see through what marketers are telling them, what brands are communicating with them, what's the purpose of the organization. People have started to ask these questions just because I think we have become more conscious as individuals, and what's happened all around us has really changed us from a fundamental human behavior perspective. So these are 4 changes that I think have happened from what consumers were for us in a couple of years back to what they are today.
Thank you, Nikhil. Priyanka, next question's for you. So you handle an everyday use brand, a very well-known one. In fact, a lot of people call their toothpaste Colgate, in spite of whatever brand it may be. It's a noun, it's a verb. For a lot of us, we're so used to buying these, common products from our local stores, from our local retail outlets. But over the last 14, 15 months, these stores have clearly been replaced by online channels, And how has the consumer journey, therefore, evolved for you? And do you think, more importantly, I think the question everyone is asking is, do you think these behavioral changes be permanent? Are they sticky? And how will this change your strategy? So are behavioral changes sticky? How will this change your strategy? And do you feel you're better prepared for 2021 and beyond if these changes stay?
Sure. So, we're always looking ahead, right? Whether it was when modern trade was growing, and now, online commerce has been growing. So while during COVID times, we did see more shoppers coming and more shoppers coming, from small towns, we had started our journey much earlier. We've done detailed understanding of online shopping behaviors, mapping offline and online consumer journeys, to ensure that we are gearing up, for these behavior changes. So accelerating some of these things in the last, 15 to 20 months has not been a significant challenge. Like, for example, some of the shifts that we've had to do is, more offline shoppers coming online meant that, there was changing behavior or purchase pattern online, right? So we had to make sure that some of our highly penetrated brands, which, shoppers were used to buying through, let's say, stores, were available adequately online to meet those demands. Then we saw more shoppers coming in from tier 2 and tier 3 towns, which meant, in order to be the brand of choice when these new shoppers are coming online, we enhanced our efforts, to reach and sort of engage with them across their consumer journey. And we made sure that, we were present either through search or through media when they were trying to search online. So, these were some of the enhancements that we did. And in tier 1 cities, where there were more shoppers buying, we also launched more sort of categories and products with specific benefits, right, to cater to more needs. We've launched a full sort of premium kids oral care toothpaste portfolio, which caters to kids of different age groups. We've got a more diverse portfolio on toothbrushes for kids. So, those are the aspects that we've enhanced. And, we've also used technology in other ways. One of the things that we did 2 months down the line after COVID was to launch a tele-dentistry platform. So while oral care problems, though not life-threatening, can be extremely painful and, cause a lot of grief. And we realized that, dentist clinics were shut, so people really didn't have a chance or, were not able to meet the dentist. So, we very quickly sort of thought of this idea, and we launched a tele-dentistry platform, which enabled people to get a consultation done with the dentist, either through video or chat through the comfort of their house. And, this was absolutely free. So this was, sort of another use of technology that we did, based on the changing behavior. And to your point of, how do we see behavior, as in behavior linked to technology and online consumption? Yes, I do expect it to stay on, and we will continue to sort of accelerate our efforts to ensure that, we're tapping into the right things to meet this consumer.
Thank you, Priyanka. So the last 18 months have kind of just accelerated what you guys were anyways planning for. And I think that that's the story with all brands now. And I think the tele-dentistry piece is really good at, mother of a small child. And I know how important that is. Thank you so much. So Vishal, you handle the space for multiple clients. So all kinds of brands, from your daily use to your high-end luxury brands. What have you seen in terms of consumer journeys? Do you think there are portions of the funnel, the sales funnel, that are getting more significant versus others in these times?
Yeah, absolutely. There are quite a few changes that we've actually seen. So if you just look at the media behavior itself, right? One thing that you would have noticed is that the time spent online during the pandemic has gone up significantly, and across multiple categories, whether it's watching videos online, as Priyanka mentioned also, whether it's on e-commerce, whether it's on social platforms. And the range is anywhere between 30% to 60% in terms of the spike, in terms of time spent, also in terms of user growth in each of these platforms. So that's definitely an indication in terms of how online and digital media is actually playing a very significant role in terms of the consumer journey and the impact that it has got across decision and behavior across the consumer journey. The interesting point to note over here is that obviously across different categories, digital play a very different role in terms of the influence that it actually has in a purchase decision. And it differs, right? So in the auto category, it's a lot more. CPG category also we're seeing it a lot, but it's the larger point is that it's made a huge impact across almost every single industry. The second thing to note is essentially is that, and if you also look at the edX, right? The interesting part of the edX also. So we were upwards of north of about 25 to 30% in terms of digital spends to the overall edX as such, and that's expected to grow 35% more. This year, and we should be in the 35 to 40% range. So that's a huge jump in terms of digital spends actually going towards engaging with consumers. I think the second interesting point to note, essentially is this entire space around video. So while a lot of people are actually coming online, a good amount of them are actually going behind a paywall. And if I could just take a leaf from the Google's the messy middle as such, right? So a lot of times. What we're noticing right now is that the messy middle has become really, really messy because a lot of time is spent in the middle half of the funnel to kind of evaluate and decide what is it that how is it that they like to buy and what kind of product as such. Right? So the time taken to make a purchase actually has also gone up significantly. And the interesting thing to note also is that if you look at the behavior, what's happening on marketplaces like Amazon, and if you were to compare that with like the old traditional Google search as such, right? So interestingly enough, there's a huge switch, right? So on product-specific searches, you now see the marketplaces becoming pretty dominant in that space. So the number one search engine for a lot of the products actually in brand-led searches, has now moved towards the marketplaces, and that's a very interesting observation in terms of the user behavior also. So, and if you look at the number of sessions also happening on e-commerce portals, it gives you an indication that people are actually coming, evaluating, going out, coming back, evaluating. Then this has kind of increased a lot more in the recent times. And it could be due to the reasons of what was mentioned a little earlier, right? In terms of the consumers becoming far more health conscious, becoming far more prudent. They have a lot of time at their hand, and all this has made a difference in terms of the way the behavior has actually changed from the middle and the bottom funnel. And if you look at the funds also from a marketing lens, a lot of it is now getting a lot more distributed towards the middle and the bottom funnel actually. So that's a key shift that we've seen in terms of user behavior and also implication towards marketing spends going online.
So consideration portion of the funnel, I'm aware of a product, and the amount of time I take to consider whether I need to buy it or not has really increased, right? So the middle funnel.
That's right. Consideration is also in terms of purchase also, right? So like I said, in the typical journey, you'd find that you look at a marketplace and say, okay, now a marketplace is basically a place where a person is already in the intent of buying. So he's already there in the intent of making a purchase. But the interesting point I'm trying to make over here is that it's not just, there are a lot of brands are launching themselves on marketplaces. And the point is that you can look at a marketplace now to launch a brand, which you can actually create awareness about a product over there on a marketplace, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that the messy middle, which Google talks about essentially, has become a lot more messier. And, it's the strategies therefore will kind of change depending on which category that you fall into.
Also, you speak about 35% growth in AdX. I really love that number there. So thank you, Vishal. So Nikhil, I'm going to take it on from Vishal, what he's saying that, the consideration portion of the funnel is increasing, and Dyson as a product is usually bought after a lot of research. And I've seen that you as a company actually encourage this time that consumers spend on research. There is a host of tutorials on your website. There is a lot of, support that is given before you actually purchase the product. So what are the ways that you use to identify the right consumer and engage them thereafter? Is there a journey remapping that's happening, and how important is it, and how are you guys doing this?
So, I mean, look, it's a great question. And obviously it's fundamentally important for us to identify who our consumers are, simply because we are a premium utility brand. So we understand that it's not for everybody. And we also understand that there are specific target audience who are way more inclined than others. So the first thing that we always do is to get more and more understanding about our target consumers. We look into our own transaction data. We talk to our own owners. We look at transactions that happened on third-party marketplaces to just get a really good understanding of what kind of profiles are there. And we create separate audience pools and profiles basis understanding of that TG. We then go on and actually do a journey mapping for each of these audience segments. So there are people who would be comfortable going straight to a Dyson.in, reading a few tutorials and find it comfortable to buy this product. There are people who would like to have assisted sales. So we have, for example, a video demo and an assisted chat just to handhold the consumer who would still come and buy online, but needs a bit more help than the previous one. And then there are consumers who would like to touch and feel and experience the product, right? So for that, we are also expanding our offline distribution because we understand this journey is fairly, omni-channel. It crosses online, offline, and therefore you need to do something for this set of audience as well. And then there are different need sets. I mean, people are looking at these products for different need sets. So therefore, how do you take that into account in terms of how you message to them and how you reach out to them also becomes important. From a more technical point of view, we look at our own existing data. We crunch it a lot. And basis the profiles that we identify, we create lookalike audiences. We do all those sort of things that are necessary to actually get as much precision based in our targeting and outreach as possible. And therefore, the fundamental understanding of each segment and their journey, which sometimes vary from a single day to as long as 6 months, is important. And there are people who take almost 6 months to decide. They come to our website, they go to our stores, they will read a lot more online reviews, etc., etc. So we just need to understand who is looking for what, and therefore what kind of solves is required.
So each consumer has kind of its own journey, and I'm sure it's not easy for brands to map each of them and do the kind of precision targeting that you do. So kudos to that, Nikhil. Priyanka, coming to you, we've established, from what Nikhil is telling us, from what Vishal is telling us, and from what the data is telling us, we've established that the consideration portion of the funnel is definitely growing, and the willingness to explore new products, not just research something but explore new products, categories like hygiene, dental hygiene. People have a lot more time to do research into these categories. So how are you using this to your advantage for, say, newer niche brands like Ved Shakti Spray? What kind of channels, formats are you using? Do you see significant changes in your media plan as such?
Sure. So that's an interesting question, for a category like us, So look, we are used by millions of people, right? So we are deeply penetrated. So at a very hygiene level, basic principles of media reach, frequency, and good quality content, remain very important for us. But, like Vishal was saying, as with increased time spent and consumption of online media, people are spending time across platforms, right? What is also happening is they are consequently, it's leading to increased time spent on the consideration funnel, be it on e-commerce platforms where people are spending time and discovering products, through search, or be it through, the Google search platform. Across platforms, be it social media, there's discovery of products happening. So there is a far higher time also consequently being spent on the consideration and purchase aspects of the consumer journey. So from a marketing standpoint, what are the key things that we are doing? And we are emphasizing on 3 to 4 things. One is we're leveraging data to map the consumer journey so that we understand what's the journey from people getting aware of anything new, and then moving them down to the consideration and the purchase funnel. We are using tools like social listening, inciting to be able to create, and these consumer journeys to create effective sort of solutions, and ensuring that we are now present, across channels which drive people down the consideration and the purchase funnel. And of course, all of this is powered by a content engine feed, because we know now that you need to, create different and more relevant messaging when people are in a moment of, considering products versus when they are at the purchase funnel. So, it is a combination of all these things. So a big shift, of course, has been, more emphasis on both channels, investments, content, to move the consumer down the funnel, and focusing more on consideration and purchase, while of course, awareness continues to be key, but ensuring that we sort of move people down the funnel adequately.
So using content as a medium, that's become really center point to the media plan, is what you're saying, to actually move people, do that research and help them do that research faster and move them towards the sales aspect.
Yeah, so it's you choosing the right platforms, winning in moments where people are searching. So when people are searching for products, what's the kind of messaging that you would want to give? If somebody wants a certain kind of toothpaste, then you have to have a messaging that relates to the need and the search immediately, right? Versus when you're looking at awareness, you would want to talk about the brand proposition in a more holistic manner. And when people are on purchase-related platforms where they are closer to the mindset of buying something, then the messaging and the content has to be more to nudge them to buy the product.
Correct.
And we're also using tools like retargeting and lookalikes to see how we can go back and reach people who are aware of the of a proposition and nudge them to with more messaging, relevant messaging, to move them down the mid to the lower funnel metrics.
Thank you, Priyanka. So Vishal, we've established a few behaviors, which is increased time spent on the consideration portion of the funnel, the willingness to try new products, and also I think increased trust in online channels. Since we've started buying groceries online, the trust on online channels is really increased.
Right.
How should brands really, react and respond to these consumer behaviors? So if you have to give me 3 strategies that are, completely non-negotiable today, what would they be?
If you look at 3, if you give me 3 strategies that brands should follow, I would say the first thing that I'm noticing, most of our clients actually are adopting an approach where, as we're mentioning, the data-driven approach, right? So the whole point about trying to segment audiences and find ways in which we can communicate to them in a more relevant way. So just to give an example, right? The last count that I got when I spoke to some of the OTT platforms was that close to about 25 odd million people are approximately behind a paywall, okay, watching content, and that number is actually growing. So when they're going actually media dark, it becomes extremely difficult to have a data-driven approach to reach out to these consumers, because the traditional norms of reaching out to them might not necessarily work. And so when you look at it from that lens, right, the approach that one might need to adopt is taking a data-driven approach, where you look at audience segments across various platforms, understand the kind of behaviors that each of them actually have, and then find the right kind of communication that can reach out to them. Right. And I think that's a very interesting shift that we're actually seeing, because one thing that we've noticed, and obviously, which is actually quite obvious, but not very obvious for a lot of clients, is that digital is actually a lean forward medium and not a lean back medium, right? So, so when you look at television, obviously you can put up a 30-second video and it'll actually work. But when you look at online, it'll definitely not going to work, right? And you need to find that need state and communicate to that individual in the way the person is most likely to respond to. And I think that's one very important strategy, if I may say so, right? So working towards understanding consumers, segmenting consumers, and bring personalized communication in a manner which will get better response to your communication and move the person down the funnel. I think the second important thing that I'm noticing a lot of our clients actually focusing on right now is in the space of measurement analytics, to kind of drive an attribution model to figure out what actually works for them and what doesn't work for them, right? So that's another interesting area that we're seeing a lot of traction. And I think each client needs to kind of focus a little bit more in terms of building their own models, because the models actually differ depending on category and industries, and also the consumer, the lifetime journey of the consumers, and so on and so forth. But that's an interesting space to be in, because when you look at it from that lens, especially when you have clients where the consumers are buying online and also buying offline, the attribution needs to be absolutely right. And if you don't get that mix right, and it's difficult to optimize campaigns to yield better ROI. So that's a second area that I think one needs to definitely keep in mind, while putting a strategy in place. And the third thing I would say is essentially is this entire piece, like you mentioned about the middle area, right? How do we kind of, a lot of time being spent in the middle area, and therefore how do you kind of evaluate that? So one of the interesting areas that we're seeing gaining traction right now is in the area of social commerce. And I think that's an area that's going to kind of grow quite a bit, because most of the, if you look at Amazon today also, or most of the marketplaces are actually focusing a lot on content, right? So, and if you look at the social platforms also are focusing a lot on commerce, right? So if you look at Facebook, and I mean, if you look at most of the social platforms, right, even the upcoming ones like Trell, for instance, are focusing a lot on building their e-commerce activities. And while they're trying to build a social, a network of social enthusiasts in creating the right kind of content, the intent is to try and drive people down into the marketplace. And if you look at the marketplaces, the intent is to try a lot more content. So this lines are getting actually blurred between content and commerce actually. And I think one needs to focus on how to kind of create the right kind of content, and engaging the influencers, find ways in which you can get influencers to kind of push, content in a manner that can drive commerce. Yeah. So these are the three things I would say: a data-driven marketing approach, secondly, trying to drive the attribution and focusing on building a measurement framework more than anything else. And third, essentially, is to drive, work on the messy middle, which I call about, and try and drive commerce to that. Yeah.
I like that term, the messy middle, and it kind of sums up everything that we've mostly been talking about. So identifying the need state measurement, measurement platforms and attribution, especially when we're talking omni-channel, going online and offline, how do brands really do that? And consideration and content becoming very, very important in all this. Thank you, Vishal. Thank you for that answer. So coming to our last question today, and this is a question that I want all three of you to, take a stab at. So willingness to try out new products, that's something that came out of our conversation today. So and I look at it like a threat and an opportunity, right? It's a double-edged sword. So how are you guys tackling this for each of your categories? Priyanka, shall we start with you on this?
Sure. I mean, for us, innovation is at the heart of the brand, clearly, and now more so we are ensuring that, we understand and move with culture, and that we stay young, relevant, and dynamic as a brand. I think those are the, few principles that we are sort of using to ensure and to tap into this trend. And if you've seen, a lot of new launches that we've done in the last 1 year, and all are sort of, talking to this. We've launched a slew of Ayurvedic products to meet the increasing preference, of people towards natural offerings. We very recently launched, an oil pulling product, which is so native and local to the ritual of, oil pulling. So clearly, these are the three principles that you're looking at. Is always that innovation at the heart, and stay with culture, move with culture, pick those trends. And stay dynamic and young as a brand.
Fantastic. So stay with culture, move with culture. I like that quote, Priyanka. Nikhil, what do you think? How are you handling this? Or is this not a threat for Dyson? Because I hardly see any products that are up to that mark.
No, we love people trying out. I mean, this is something that's working well for us, because just because our categories are relatively new, and we don't think our products directly compete. So we want new consumers. So, I mean, look, what we need to do is, or what we do is spend and focus a lot on education and awareness. So we today invest a lot of time in fundamental customer education, be it about, let's say, damage to the by some of the other products in the market, be it about the importance of good quality air by telling them what AQI is and how it impacts them, or be it about health and hygiene and the cleanliness of their own homes in which they stay. And therefore, we invest a lot more time in education and awareness. The second thing is, of course, innovation that continues to be at the heart of Dyson. So this is principally a technology company. So therefore, whatever trends we see in future and whatever insufficiencies we see in the market, the idea is always to come out with a compelling, better solution. And the whole idea is that it should be so good that once somebody has tried it, they will never look back again. So that continues to be very, very important. And the third one is to never destroy trust. So I think for an organization in categories such as ours, it's very, very important that we continue to invest and don't falter or give our consumers any chance that we've broken their trust. So word of mouth, peer reviews, I mean, these are things that are very, very important for us. So we would like to educate them as much as possible about the choices they are making. And in case of any issues that they face, things like after sales service, things like owner experience, there is almost like an obsession that we have in terms of taking really good care of our owners. So I think these are three things that help us really leverage this trend. I mean, it's not a threat for us, it's a good thing, but this is how we make the most of it.
So education, innovation, and trust. I'm seeing a lot of common strategies between a brand like Dyson and a brand like Colgate. Even though both these brands are so varied in their offerings and categories in everything, and there are so many common things that are kind of bringing marketing strategies together. What do you think, Vishal? What do you think of this?
No, I completely agree, and it's very interesting, right? Because what we've noticed actually is that when you looked at retention as a strategy, basically it was predominantly dominated by the airline industry and the BFSI industry, right? And if you look at it, their entire business models were built around retention, like acquiring, and of course trying to find ways in terms of engaging with consumers from a retention standpoint. But now we're looking at even the CPG category doing something on the similar lines, right? Trying to build a collection of audiences who they can reach out to on an ongoing basis, and then try and engage with them on an ongoing basis and build a culture around the brand and so on and so forth. So the typical model that Byron Sharp has basically in terms of acquire as much as possible and don't be too worried about the retention aspect. I think that is now we're slowly starting to see that it's slightly changing to some extent, right? I think retention is also taking center stage for a lot of our clients also. So I see it moving in directions where one, acquisitions will be very, very critical for brands, and no doubt about it, they'll have to work towards that. And also retention strategies also become equally important, right? So we've seen some of the D2C brands that we work with, for instance, have restructured themselves to ensure that basically there is a dedicated department that's required to manage retention as a strategy, as well as a performance marketing department that's going out there and acquiring new consumers, right? So that's the interesting space that I think that will kind of evolve. And I think if you can draw the fine balance between the retention strategies and acquisition strategies, that's a great space to be in, is what I'd like to say.
Absolutely. Consumers are at a point where, initially Colgate or Dyson were these big brands that I saw in stores, but I never spoke to. But today as a consumer, I feel very confident, speaking to a Colgate and speaking to a Dyson, be it through social channels, and therefore the loyalty and the retention factors become very, very important for these brands. I think we had a wonderful conversation today, and this brings us to the end of the session on evolving omni-channel consumer journey and the online consumer profile. It's been an insightful session, and I want to thank each and every one of you, Priyanka, Nikhil, and Vishal, for taking your time to share your thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Shani.
Thanks for having us. It was great to be part of this.
Thank you. And a big shout out to Amazon again for partnering with us in this initiative. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.